Welcome back to Darkness Prevails, where people like you share their scary stories and I narrate them. Today's episode features monsters where they're not supposed to be, possibly demon-possessed people doing that creepy crawly chasey thing, and particularly scary cottages in the woods. So absolutely annihilate that like button. Comment below what your favorite story is once the episode is done. And remember, if you want to have a chance of your story being narrated, you gotta send it to us first at darkstories.org. Now, let's begin. Carried in the dark, from Scared But Alive. 4 months ago, my girlfriend and I decided to go on and stay at my family's new cottage that my parents purchased right before the Rona. I'm 24, so I went up with my girlfriend, who's 23, and we arrived at this comfy cottage, nestled up in the Canadian wilderness, away from the city, away from the craziness of it all, or so I thought. We were having a great time for a few days, when we decided to go on a walk or hike together in the surrounding forest. I'm skinny, but my girlfriend is an avid jogger, so she's in much better shape than me. 40 minutes in, and I found myself getting tired as we hiked the trails around the cottage, while she still wanted to keep going. So I let her. She had her cell phone and there was a good signal around here, so I watched as she jogged away down the trail. I didn't have my cell phone. I'd left it back at the cottage, and now, being alone in the woods, I realized how quiet it was. I thought it was peaceful. I turned back to slowly walk my unhealthy self back to the cottage. After walking for what I thought was 40 more minutes back, I got nervous. I still hadn't arrived at the cottage. I know they say, if you're lost, to stay where you are, but I was confident it was down one of these backwoods trails, so I kept going. Soon I thought I heard a voice calling my name out in the woods. Sounded an awful lot like my girlfriend. I called back, running in the direction of her voice, leaving the trail, which was a mistake. I was more lost than ever now. Great, I hadn't even familiarized myself with those woods, and now I was lost in them. I wasn't worried about my girlfriend. She had a GPS on her phone, and she was used to running down unfamiliar trails. But I was hopelessly lost. I sighed and began to walk in a direction I thought the trail might be, but I couldn't find it again. I know on the other side of the property are highways, but the back is woods for miles. So if I pick a direction and keep to it, I thought I might stumble onto a highway, then walk back to the cottage. But that would take hours, and it was already evening. I started at a jog, breathing heavily and hoping I was going towards the highway, or the cottage, not deeper into the forest. It started to get dark, and I was exhausted from hiking for hours. I was sure my girlfriend would be freaking out right now and had called my parents and brother, that they'd be driving up here to look for me, maybe with a search team. I felt like an idiot at the time. I fell to the ground at one point when it was so dark that I couldn't find my bearings. It would be useless to keep stumbling around in the dark, dehydrated, tired. So I found a tree and made a poorly constructed shelter with whatever sticks and logs I can find in the dark, and I curled up inside, pulling my sweater and jacket close to avoid the bugs, as well as the night chill. I listened to the frogs and my own inner anxiety as I fell into a very uncomfortable sleep that I wish I never fell into. I woke up to the feeling of being carried. Someone's hand was under my knees and the other on my back. There was this very hot breath on my face and neck. The forest around me was silent and still very dark, but now the moon shone a bit through the trees. Disoriented, I opened my eyes and choked on my breath. What was carrying me was not a person. When I looked at its face, it had the head of a wolf. A massive gray-furred wolf with yellow eyes that looked almost human. And if it was carrying me in its arms, then it was walking on two legs. Walking, carrying me through the forest. Once I could find my courage and realized I wasn't having just a nightmare, I used all my strength and pushed hard against its chest, falling out of its grip, its claws digging into my side and the side of my leg. I fell and rolled onto my feet on the ground, and I looked up at it. It tilted its head, then began to take a step forward, reaching out with a clawed hand. I bolted to the left and ran as fast as I could. I could hear grunts and the breaking of tree branches behind me as I ran desperately. I couldn't tell if I was getting away or if it was gaining on me. All of a sudden, the ground fell out from under me, and I fell down an embankment into a ditch beside one of the highways. I thanked my lucky stars when I saw a truck driving down in the distance. I scrambled to my feet and ran towards it, still hearing noises in the trees to my right. I waved my arms wildly, and the huge transport truck stopped 40 feet from me. The driver got out cursing up and down at the side of me and pulled out his cell phone. I stopped and caught my breath, not able to answer any of the questions the old bearded trucker asked. He helped me into his truck, and I half collapsed onto the seat as he got in. I understood him as he said he was driving to meet an ambulance that was on its way. When we saw it, he honked his horn and pulled over. The paramedics helped me out of the truck and onto the stretcher, and that's just when I started to feel the pain in my side and leg from where I fell out of the creature's grip. I had been cut up by its claws. At the hospital, my parents, brother, and girlfriend all came into my room after I was stitched up. The police, paramedics, and my family and girlfriend assumed that I had been attacked by a bear. I never said otherwise, but they wondered how I was picked up so far from the cottage. They said it was crazy I could travel such a far distance in one night, but I don't think I did, because I was carried. I was nowhere near where they were searching for me. 37 stitches later and an IV for fluids and pain medication, I was released the same day in the evening, and my parents drove us back to the cottage. I didn't want to go back, but I had my whole family with me and my girlfriend, so I felt brave. At the cottage, I ate a hamburger my dad had cooked on the barbecue and went to bed early. I woke up around 5 a.m. and rolled out of bed with a cold sweat. My girlfriend was asleep beside me, but I felt anxiety and sore as my stitches rubbed against my clothes. So I walked into the living room where my brother was passed out on the pull-out sofa. It was then I heard my name being called. Once again, it was my girlfriend's voice. I looked back in the room, but she was fast asleep even still. I realized then the calls were coming from outside. I peeked out the living room curtains and I saw a dark shape, yellow eyes in the woods. I stepped back from the curtains and shook my brother awake. He protested, but I told him what really happened to me in hushed tones, and that the thing was outside right now. He looked out the curtains and shut them quickly, looking at me with fear. Then he shared a story with me that he had been told when he was scouting as a kid. A story about Skinwalkers. He asked me if I responded to the calls in the woods when I first got lost. Honestly, I didn't remember if I did call back or not, and if I did, I'm not sure what I said. To be honest, I still don't know exactly. My brother stayed awake with me until morning, then we drove home. I refused to visit that cottage again, and it makes my parents upset, but I'm terrified of going back, scared that if I do go back, that thing will take me again. I can't go back. Because of the loss of income from the Rona, my parents might have to sell the cottage soon, and I hope they do. God, I hope they do. Possessed woman or supernatural being. From Cagiest Nickel 72. This happened in Utah. I've lived here all my life and know the state pretty well. I had a great friend of mine spending the night one night. We've been friends since about 4th grade. At the time, we were both in about 7th or 8th grade. Now, I lived maybe 10 minutes of a walk away from a Common Sense, which is a gas station for those who have never heard of it. There was also a school just off the corner from my house at the time. My friend and I were getting hungry, so we looked through the house, but there really wasn't much of what we wanted. We eventually decided to combine some of our allowance money to go to the gas station. We didn't end up walking by the house where the scary stuff happened on the way there. Rather, we took a main road to the gas station. The main road was a little behind the school. Usually the road is much busier, but that night it was practically barren. I didn't think much of it at the time. We soon made it to the gas station. The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, so we didn't have a lot of light left. We decided to sit outside the gas station to snack a bit before we began the walk home. Here's the part where things start to feel really weird. I've always been pretty good on feeling if something's off. So we were walking home on a back road path. I was just staring up at the sky, trying to figure out this feeling of anxiety I had. It was like a panicky feeling, and I didn't know where it was coming from. That's when me and my friend start noticing this weird star formation shifting around, like the stars are just swapping places. The two of us mentioned it at the same time. I asked my friend, "Do you have a bad feeling too? Like something is going to happen?" To which he replied with a yes. There were at least 15 shooting stars in the matter of minutes, which had us feeling even more weird than before. I was leading us because I knew the area better. He was more used to living in the city. I decided to take a road that would take us right to the school. When we turned onto this road, I felt sick to my stomach, especially when I set eyes on this house. The blinds were open with a sliding glass door, so we could see in clear as day. As we got closer, we saw a woman standing, looking in a walk-in pantry. She was pale as snow, and her hair was messy, standing straight up. My friend said we should take a different road, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to walk a longer distance. My legs were already tired, so I said we should just push on. We keep walking, and at about 60 to 50 yards away, we didn't even see her move, and our eyes never dropped from that door. Yet now she was in the middle of the kitchen, looking right in our direction. This woman was perfectly still, face unchanging, but when I got a good look at her, it chilled me to the core, and I even froze for a second. Her face was not right, not even human. Her jaw more open than humanly possible, eyes wide, but no eyes there in the sockets. Also, as dumb as it may sound, she had black upside-down crosses on her face, with these popping out black veins. I rubbed my eyes to make sure that what I was seeing was real, but then the lights inside turn off. I don't see a silhouette. Maybe I couldn't see her anymore, or maybe she just vanished. We keep on walking. At around 20 to 30 yards, we see the door sliding open, and these really long fingers are gripping the side. Still, I do not see a silhouette, as if she's hiding behind the door. My friend and I begin to speed walk. As we get near the deck, which is around 15 feet high, we hear something that chills us to our very bones.
I'm going to kill you.
She had screamed that at the top of her lungs, but the voice was both deep and wrong. Right after that, we hear the high-pitched scream of what seems to be a little girl. My head shot around to see a little girl jumping off of the deck, landing face first before us. But then she proceeded to crawl really fast, right at us. We sprinted then full speed, dropping everything we'd just bought. As we get to the corner across the street, I turn around to see if it or she is still coming at us. What I saw was horrifying. There were 3 or 4 tall figures, 9 feet tall or so, and of course that little girl thing was still crawling at us. We ran all the way home around 4 to 5 blocks straight. Ever since that day, we have not gone near that house. He lurked. From ExploreTheDerelictDoor. I'm a guy around 182 centimeters, 15 stone, and I'm not the fittest, but not exactly unfit. I work out of town, and this took place on a Tuesday morning, roughly 7 in the morning. I lit a cigarette and went about my day like normal, walked to my car, hoping I had enough gas because I'm useless at making sure I filled up. I opened the door, puffing on my cigarette a few more times, then I started the engine. Off to a good start as I drove away. I thought I'd be a little bit more prepared for the rest of the week, so I stop at the gas station. I only live a couple of minutes away from a station, which is more frustrating when I forget to fill up. This is where it gets interesting, you see. As I pulled up, I had a tingly feeling in my gut that something was off. That feeling you get when something is out of place. Like little goosebumps standing up like soldiers on my neck. I pulled the wallet from my jean pocket, and as I leaned up out of my seat, I spotted him in my rearview mirror. A strange-looking man standing at the bonnet of my car. Bushy beard, lumberjack shirt, gray jeans. He had long, stringy word hair that was parting like curtains with a ridiculous hairline, like this dude was hanging on to the hair on his head. I remember this bit distinctively because after the frightened reaction left my body, I thought to myself, dude, just shave the rest of the hair on your head. I got out to fill up, cautious of this stranger just standing there. "Hey man, frightened me there," I said to him. His reply gave me shivers. That's because he didn't say anything, he just followed me with his eyes and didn't react to anything I just said. "Tough crowd," I muttered. I filled up, not taking my eyes off of him, which caused me to go over a little bit. I locked my car, walking inside the station, throwing a few glances over to this creep before picking out a soda. I paid my bill, stepped outside the station, and to my surprise, my car was still there. And thankfully, the stranger was not. That's when I took my chance to get in my car, hit the clutch, gear, gas, and set off to work. Still a pretty normal day. I worked until 4 p.m., and I left as soon as it hit the hour. I lit a quick cigarette and got into my car. I picked up my phone and realized I had a text. "Get nappies," it said. Yay, more driving. I went to the local store, got cigarettes and nappies. A great combination, I know. The second that I paid, that feeling hit me again. My stomach twisted. I felt knotted. I took a glance over my shoulder, and I kid you not, that freaking man was behind me in line. As soon as I saw him, I felt weak. I worked 25 miles away from where the gas station near my home was. I was in a different town now, and he was here. This may seem like I was overwhelmed, overreacting, but there he was, standing there with that blank stare, just silent inside. I took off in a hurry, but made the foolish mistake of dropping my cigarettes somewhere that I'd just bought. I knew I must have dropped them, because when I got into the car, I couldn't find them. Screw it, I thought. I began driving away, and as I passed the store, I saw him again standing there at the entrance. This time he wasn't just staring, but waving as well. I think this was when I began to become a little bit frightened. He followed my car with his eyes and waved. Freaking lunatic, I thought. Maybe it was just a coincidence, and he enjoyed thinking he was scaring the random person here and there, but everything just threw me off guard. I'm the kind of guy who lives his life and keeps himself in a bubble. My family and friends is what I think about with every decision, so when something strange or different happens, I just get a little bit off guard. This happened 3 days ago, but that's not yet the reason I'm sharing this story. The following is. As of writing this, it's 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I got a phone call earlier, and a gruff-sounding man on the other side said to me,
"Hi, stranger. I've got your cigarettes. Let's have a smoke. See you soon. You're running low on gas."
Then the phone call ended abruptly. I just froze. I'm writing this in a panic right now, hoping this is just a prank. Maybe some updates will come soon. Thanks for listening. Too close for comfort. From Currywurst 411. This happened a few years ago in Germany. At the time, I had just moved in with my then girlfriend in a city at the edge between a large metropolitan area and a forest. This area has a long history of coal mining, and within walking distance of our house there were numerous old mine shafts in the forest, as well as an old mine railway line along the forest valley. Well, it was a beautiful late summer evening, and the two of us decided to go for a walk. We were dog-sitting her mother's dog, Cleo, so the decision to go out wasn't purely on a whim. Now, before we go on, it's important to the story to understand that Cleo was a specific type of dog, a Caucasian Shepherd dog mix. The members of this dog breed are herd protection dogs, bred to protect sheep herds from predators, specifically bears, in Eastern Europe. They're big, strong, and usually very lazy, content with just conserving energy and observing, but will spring into action immediately if they sense an actual or perceived threat. Now, Cleo was smaller than her purebred cousins, but every bit as much a herd protection dog. If she deemed anyone or anything to be too close to her herd, in this case that means me and my girlfriend, she would growl and bark immediately, a trait that could get quite annoying sometimes, as she would bark or growl at quite literally any passerby or animal larger than a rabbit within a 100-meter radius, especially if we were taking a break somewhere, essentially becoming stationary. She very rarely followed up on that posturing, but it would never fail. Even if she was seemingly asleep, she was vigilant enough. Now on this particular evening, we decided to take a stroll through the forest at the edge of our residential area. It was still warm. The air was filled with the sound of crickets and the smell of a recent barbecue. And once we got to the forest, we could even spot some fireflies, a rare sight in Germany these days. The sun had set even before we headed out, so it was getting pretty dark now. But the strip of forest we were in was very close to the last few houses of the area. I brought a high-powered LED flashlight with me, so we weren't worried. After a decent round along the forest paths, we decided to settle down on a nearby bench, enjoying the romantic scenery for a bit. Late summer evening, fireflies, a fairly fresh couple, you get the idea. Cleo had been very relaxed the entire walk. We hadn't seen any other people around the entire time, and apparently neither had she. She flopped down unceremoniously next to the bench and lazily surveyed the area, her ears perked up at the occasional rabbit or squirrel rustling through the sparse underbrush. Now, my girlfriend and I were obviously not paying much attention to our surroundings, but even so, I'd like to claim that the woods suddenly fell silent, or the night air took on a biting chill out of the blue, or an odor of decay wafted up without warning. But the truth is, as far as I could tell, none of that happened. We were preoccupied. Cleo was relaxing next to us on the ground, and it suddenly happened. A little distance away, a sudden, blood-curdling, inhuman scream split the comfortable nightly silence. Now, I've been an outdoorsman all my life. I've been camping numerous times in woods all over my country. I know what a deer or fox in heat or even dying sounds like. I've heard plenty of different animal screams numerous times, and this was not something I've ever heard before, nor since. And I've since scoured the internet for similar experiences. It sounded somewhat human on the very surface, but at the same time, there was a bone-chilling quality to it that made me certain no human could ever produce a sound like that. It's hard to even describe, but even remembering it, writing these words now, a shiver runs down my spine. Worse though, it came from somewhere close. If I had to guess, maybe 5 meters to the left of us, down the path or close to it. The two of us froze, and Cleo suddenly went absolutely crazy, barking and snarling in that direction, pulling hard on her leash. Once I'd shaken off the immediate paralysis, I flicked on my flashlight and flooded the area, and nothing. There was little underbrush in this part of the woods, and the trees really didn't stand that close together. You could even see a crossing path a few dozen meters away in the distance. I didn't see a thing anywhere in the area while moving the cone of my flashlight around. But Cleo had not calmed down one bit. She was still raging, pulling, snapping, and something felt very, very wrong. We got out of there as fast as we could, not daring to look back. And for all the rage Cleo was displaying, she did not hesitate a second once we headed back in the direction of civilization. I know the story ends a bit anticlimactic, but there was no big, almost human creature with red glowing eyes or anything like that. Yet in all honesty, that made it worse. It makes you question your sanity. We could impossibly just have imagined it, but there was nothing there. Nothing at all. The strangest thing, though, was Cleo's reaction. She was definitely alert the entire time. She always was. It's literally instinctual for her breed. It's their entire purpose. If it was somehow just some human playing a prank on us, she would have seen, heard, or smelled him coming a mile away and responded accordingly. If it was an animal, the same would have happened. She mostly ignores rabbits, squirrels, and the like, but even a small dog or a fox would have gotten a growl out of her at the very least. But apparently she didn't sense a single thing out of the ordinary until it happened, after which she went into total defense mode. A dog's senses of hearing and smell are much more keen than our own, yet she picked up on nothing. We went back there with her in daylight after this, or tried to. She would fight us with all her strength, not at all wanting to go back into the forest under any circumstances. I've been there a few times since, always during the day, but I could never feel at ease there anymore. Both my now ex-girlfriend and I have done extensive research online to find an explanation. So far, we haven't, and I doubt we ever will. Sleep Paralysis Abduction from BeardedAsgardian. I was 10 or possibly 11 years old. At the time, I had an intense dislike of aliens, UFOs, and anything paranormal or supernatural. Despite that, I was one of those kids who wandered the internet looking for stories of alien abductions and other paranormal stories. I usually got extremely scared and oftentimes found myself looking around every corner after I read those stories. I was entranced by these stories, and even if I was scared, it brought me peace to my mind, knowing that I wasn't alone in the belief of aliens. One day I found a site that was filled with stories, and it was updated regularly. I read so many stories that I began to notice a pattern, and I was even more terrified. They had steps or bullet points to help people not get abducted. These are what I can remember. Don't put your bed near a window. Keep an animal, strongly suggest dogs, near you at night. Sleep after 12 to 2 a.m. Weapons do not work. This wasn't the last one, but it still gives me chills. You cannot escape, they can and will find you. So, I have dogs to this very day, as an animal lover. But my bed was usually always near a window, and I never fell asleep after 12. My dad had guns, but those were used never or rarely. I was terrified, but don't remember if I ever saw that site again. Not that it was taken down or anything, I just remember a lot of green boxes and text. Possibly the site was updated, but I'd never know by this point. Cut to a comfy autumn day, and this brave boy was watching the McPherson tape. It was the first found footage movie based on aliens, and I was petrified by it. I truly thought it was real. It had a grainy VHS filter that only cameras back then could make. The audio distorted whenever the aliens appeared, and just typing this makes me jumpy. Anyway, that night was literally the worst night I ever had. I can still remember the panic after every sound, the pure terror in my voice when my parents said goodnight, and I replied with, "Don't go." I fell asleep pretty fast, and I remember having an odd feeling come over me. I felt like I was being watched, so I opened my eyes. My head was facing the foot of the bed, and I could see a ball of light. My eyes followed it until I saw a little hand grab it. My heart began to pound. I tried to look towards my door. Oh my God, I saw another one. It was bigger and it was staring right at me. I looked towards my desk, which was across from me. Oh God, another one. I panicked, my voice gone. There was a long, droning noise in my head, a pain in my chest. They were moving closer. My eyes were darting around, pleading with the beings. "Leave me alone." Their eyes stared back, void, empty, clearly not understanding my silent pleas. I could feel the weight on my chest, something plunging into it. I didn't want to die. I had no chance of fighting back. It was over before it began, and then I shouted, "Ouch." They were gone, and I was left with a horrible pain in my chest. I took off my shirt in the bathroom and found 4 marks on my chest. I placed my hand over them and noticed they were not cuts. I went back in my room. My noise machine was still creating white noise, so I was able to drift off to sleep again. I never brought this up to anyone, ever. I just kept living life under the impression I'd experienced a real abduction. It haunted me my entire life, and I broke down a few times later in my life. I began to listen to YouTube narrators and researched a certain epidemic, sleep paralysis. I put the pieces together and figured out that I hadn't been abducted. I had experienced sleep paralysis. The sound in my head was my noise machine. The reason I couldn't speak was due to the fact I wasn't using all my faculties. The incisions were not probes, but probably my fingernails digging into my skin. I was notorious for not cutting my fingernails, so they were too long, and my hand more than likely was on my chest. What the light was, I'm not entirely sure. The aliens, though, that was due to the intense fear I had of the McPherson tape. Nowadays, I regularly watch that video, during the day at least. I can't watch alien movies at night. Close Encounters, Fire in the Sky, and even E.T. give me mild nightmares. That's way better than before, though. I still believe in aliens. but not out of fear anymore. Instead, it's mainly about man's hubris. We can't be the only intelligent living creature in the universe. That's just egotistical. Skinwalker in southwest Scotland. From Abigail. I've always heard the stories, from Reddit or different YouTube channels, about skinwalkers and Wendigo. I would usually think to myself, these are obviously fake. But slowly, over time, I began to believe them. Not all of them, but many. Several months ago, I began hearing howling outside in my garden. I should explain that I live in the countryside in a small village in Scotland. Unless you drive, it's not really easy to get to. It's surrounded by farmlands and small forested areas. Nothing crazy, but that's what makes this even weirder for me. My family owns 3 Siberian Huskies, all very behaved, although the oldest of them, Logan, is a particularly grumpy old dog. I usually stay up during the night as I have some mental health issues that cause me to struggle to sleep. I usually sit up with the dogs, let them out into the garden when needed, and watch YouTube on the TV to keep myself occupied. I do this until someone wakes up the next morning, after which I would go to bed. I should note, I always keep every door locked with the key in the lock, and windows locked and covered. So I began hearing strange howls in my garden. I first thought it was probably another dog on the street where I live. But no other dog owners have dogs that howl. Instead, they only bark, and they're kept in during the night. I still palmed it off until I realized the howls sounded identical to my huskies. I've had these huskies for years, and I know their sound better than my own. I would check the house to see all 3 lying around me sleeping soundly. Then I would check outside, but I never noticed anything. I'd shrug it off and put it down to my horrible sleeping pattern. The sounds would never go away, though. Eventually, I would hear banging at the door handle being battered and pulled on, along with the occasional howl. I'd thought maybe I left a dog outside and opened the door, but there was nothing. I'd then notice all 3 behind me looking a bit uncomfortable, Logan sometimes growling. At this point, I grew really uncomfortable and would avoid the kitchen altogether. I would turn off all the lights and hide in the living room with the dogs, watching TV. If they needed out for the bathroom, I would stand at the door and call them in immediately after they were done. I would not let them near the back of the garden, as it gave me a terrible feeling in my stomach. I would never let them out without the garden light being on. 5 weeks before the Rona hit, I went off sick from work due to mental health. This made my sleeping pattern 100 times worse. I stayed up every night without fail, hiding with my dogs in the living room. Of course, I'd still hear that howling and knocks on the back door leading to the garden every so often. I'd sometimes check outside to notice a large dark shadow at the back of the garden behind my dad's small tool shed. This shed and my dad's garden fence is 6 feet tall. The shadow looks like it's bending over, yet it was still at least the length of the fence alone. I would shrug this off, thinking, it's just a shadow. But still, I felt that horrible feeling in my stomach, like the pain of fear. Another time, I swear I saw glowing red or amber eyes, but I ignored it, continuing to hide in the living room, watching a video on Reddit stories. Eventually, I'd feel I was being watched. My dogs would sometimes be on edge, and I've noticed weird marks on their faces every so often, the days after our night sits. My family says it's probably the dogs playing rough with each other, but I can't help but believe I may have drawn something to me. After all the stories I've heard of the strange things people see in the woods, after all the times I even said I wish I'd see something like that myself, it might have actually come true. And now I'm kicking myself for those comments. I always carry protection to the back door when downstairs alone. I even feel something watching me when I'm driving at night. On one occasion a few nights ago, I saw this especially big black house cat. These cats usually get scared away when I park my car, but this one just sat there, staring at me with giant amber eyes, like the ones I'd seen in the dark. I now even get nightmares of some giant creature stalking me, going for the kill. However, I always wake up before the finishing blow. It seems these things aren't to be joked about. Otherwise, they may be drawn to you, and karma just might punish you for it. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, more scary stories are coming soon. So stay tuned, send us your story at darkstories.org. Like, share, and comment on this episode. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate or have donated in the past. Stay safe out there, and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.